Good morning, afternoon, or evening. I am Stephanie Joy with All Things Social Security and the attorney at Joy Disability. You're about to see what should be a question and answer format type of chat from our live session on a particular topic that we find that a lot of people keep asking about. So I'm sharing it here. If there are pieces that could have been added that weren't added during the live, because it's a kind of a fast-paced Q&A that we do every Wednesday at 1 p.m. You might just find that I added something to the end of it to give it a little more clarity and a little more details for those that are interested in that particular topic. So check to see if that's at the end. Otherwise, enjoy the video. Bye-bye. Rangal says, how often should symptom journals be compiled and submitted? That's probably very specific to the claimant, I would think, and the patient, right? I like submitting them, not just like, here's what I would probably do. Submit them to the doctor, in a way that they can't really escape putting them in your file. That could be uploading them to a portal. If you have to hand it to them, which is the worst, always keep a copy. I would fax it to them if I had to, because then you have proof that you sent it. And I would say, please make sure this is included in my file. I need the doctor to have a historical picture of the frequency of my bedridden migraines, my severity of my IBS and bathroom time. You know what I mean? And whatever else might be the kind of thing that you would journal. That way it's got a better chance of being in the medical record, which does at least a small amount of good relative to you just handing it to the SSA. Handing it to the initial or recon adjudicator itself, I don't think that's going to be worth anything because, first of all, you can say it in your application and your function report, right? If you're in the bathroom that much. And it's just your statements, again, which they can't really award you based on that. When I say putting it into the medical record, it might have a little bit more, but it also might affect the way the doctor reports about you. And then by the time, if it has to go to a judge, it's now part of that doctor's record. The judge is going to see it in the medical record, not as something that's going to be a statement from claimant, which is in a totally different section from the medical records. So there's that. And usually when you're submitting those, it's so that you can discuss with the doctor, we haven't seen that medicine change the frequency of these migraines or the duration or the severity. Should we, are you looking at other therapies I should use for the migraines? So there's usually other conversations that can go along with it, because you're only going to submit the journal if it's kind of a severe thing that would really be taking you off task, like we were talking about before with Baxter, taking you off task for physical reasons from what would otherwise be at your workstation at work, right? You're in the bathroom, or you have to go lie down on the bathroom floor because of a migraine. How often? I would say it depends. Like if it's something that happens daily, like an IBS thing might be daily, it's really hard to say. I would think every 3 months is not too often. It gives a lot, kind of gives a durational trend thing versus if you just give a week, it's just 1 week, kind of shows more. But there could be reasons and times when you would do it more frequently than that. When we submit them, because for us, it would be us submitting them after we've looked at them. And I usually do a cover letter saying, as you can see, there were 7 days in August that, Rangal couldn't, was in with a bedridden migraine. It totaled so many hours, or so many days. And in September, it was this many. In October, it was only 2, but they lasted for 3 days each. That's 6 days, And so I kind of sum it up for them so they don't have to try to read it and figure out the math. They're going to look and make sure I'm telling the truth, I'm sure, but if they care at all. But I like to give them here's the summary of what that says right on the top, on a separate page. And then, present it that way. So at least they can see the waxing and the waning. And, even on the best of the months, it's still not consistent with satisfactory work attendance or whatever. Deli's asking about membership. I have no idea. Just saying. I think you can just click it, right? If you're already a member, are you already a member? Probably wouldn't be joined. I wouldn't think there would be an update, upgrade.
Happy Father's Day. Okay, really quick, a little blurb here about the importance of keeping a symptoms journal, particularly for a certain few impairments that are really served well by them when you're trying to prove your claim of disability, where a significant part of your inability to work on a regular and consistent or reliable basis is due to one of these impairments. It could probably be done with a ton of impairments, but the ones that come to my mind screamingly are migraines, seizures, and a more rare instance of something called cyclical vomiting syndrome. If I think of more, I'll mention them as we go along. But a symptom journal is worth its weight in gold. It's not going to be the medical proof that you have the condition, but it is great support after that has already been established. And 2 years later, you're at a hearing and you're testifying as to the frequency of how often that migraine puts you in bed for 1 to 3 days, 6 hours, whatever the case may be. Having a retrospective journal that was created in real time, usually done the day after. It could be when the migraine's over. Some people, once they're back on their feet and it's just starting to go away and they know it's on its way out. You want to do it close in time. You're obviously not going to do it in the middle of a migraine, or that migraine's not very bad. Seizures, same idea. Now, for instance, if you were doing a migraine journal, it's like a calendar. You can do it on a regular calendar. You can get it at the dollar store. I've even prepared some for my clients just so they had something to print out. You know, if it's a migraine day, you could put M. If it lasted 6 hours, you might throw in 6H. If it lasted 3 days, you'd have maybe M in one day, M in next day, and the third day, maybe with a line connecting them, or M 3 days, however you want to notate it. You're going to want to use short abbreviations because you want it to fit in it. I'm not asking you to do a narrative every day you have a migraine, because the only thing you're trying to establish is frequency, duration, potentially severity, and some of the accompanying symptoms. So if you're, for instance, let's say you have noise sensitivity, most people do, NS. Light sensitivity, LS. Bedridden, maybe you would say B. You know, you'd have the M, the big M, it's a migraine day, little B. What if you are bedridden in a dark room? Maybe BDR. So all these little with commas in between them or whatever, just a little legend of sorts, abbreviations. So that day, because later on, someone like me will take that information and we will parse it down into the amount of times per month that you are bedridden because of migraine. You got to remember that being off task from work includes any time you can't be working. So if you are bedridden with something like a migraine, which to me, migraine by definition is so severe, no one can really work. I mean, if they're working, they probably have a headache and not a migraine, my opinion. So the journaling is great. I've used it on multitude of occasions successfully. Again, it doesn't replace what your doctor needs to say, but you know, in the middle of treatment, long before a hearing, you can send up potentially your journal or a summary of your journal to your doctor and say, this is how frequently I'm having them. You know, can we see if there's any kind of tweaking of the medications that can maybe bring down these numbers? Because it's obviously a huge quality destructor in your life. And that's separate and aside from the fact that it takes away from the ability to work. A impairment that causes, like I mentioned before, the cyclical vomiting syndrome. That particular case, the person, we determined from the calendar that he had been keeping before I even knew him, which was fabulous. It took a long time to get a judge to pay attention to it, but when it did, it clinched it for him for a very long back benefit period. They were vomiting. The vomiting days, you know, originally for him, it would be like multitude of days. And then he actually had H's down for hospitalization because the symptoms were so bad that they could be almost death threatening because of the dehydration. So when the hospitalization stopped, when he learned techniques to stop that severity, the journals did a great thing for proving that the vomiting days, which was 6 to 9 a month, I think it was continuing. It's just that he had learned some terrific techniques to mitigate the dehydration. Some really interesting things, including a hot shower while drinking a glass of water. So, but it helped prove that just because he's no longer going to the hospital, you don't see these hospitalizations like we had been seeing for a number of years, doesn't mean it's not happening. Because if they think it's not happening, then now he's better and he can go back to work full time on a reliable, sustained basis without calling out sick. Not the case. Another one I just thought of, IBS. Huge, huge, huge important. This one would be a little different because you A lot of times IBS, it's for many days or weeks straight, right? Sometimes it's just every day. Everyone's case is different. But I think it's important to show how many times you're in the bathroom in a given day. So this would be every day you're going to fill this out. Maybe keep it in your bathroom and just grab it. And how long you're in there per visit. And again, this goes to off task, which is a really critical part of work failure. If someone has to go to the bathroom every 40 minutes and is in there for 15, that is going to be, I'm not going to do the math right now, but let's say it's 10 times in a work day for 15 minutes. That's 150 minutes there in the bathroom during the workday. That's like 2.5 hours. Now we no longer have an 8-hour working day, do we? We have 5.5 hours. And that's excluding anything else that's a problem. So documenting how many minutes, and it doesn't have to be that often. I mean, it can still be quite limiting without it being as often as I just mentioned. But if the duration in the bathroom is a long time and the frequency, the amount of visits to the bathroom that are going to be required during the day. Some people have incontinence and they have to be very close to a bathroom. This could be true for incontinence of both kinds and also for urinary urgency potentially. Because a lot of time when someone suffers from that, they keep going to the bathroom thinking they're going to go and they don't, and then they finally do, but they had to go maybe, a bunch of trips to the bathroom before they were able to void. So all these trips to the bathrooms are time you're taking away from your workstation. So really important. So again, the IBS might keep you out of work and it might be an attendance thing, in which case you could document that you were like literally never left the house because to go to work, you had to call out because you were in the bathroom for hours. If there are accompanying symptoms, pain, cramping, some people end up vomiting. Sometimes the IBS is, constipation, sometimes it's diarrhea, sometimes it's a mixture. Little abbreviations that help which ones they were. And do it every day so that there's a clear picture of how many times a month this is happening for how long. And later on, what your attorney can do is obviously get a copy of all that stuff. And you can do it on your phone calendar, or some people do it on paper calendar. We put together the math and we explain, well, judge, you can literally chart out which months had 8 days, which months had 4, let's say it was migraines, or if it's IBS, how many minutes per day on average. We can present it in a variety of ways. The actual calendar would be attached to a certified statement from you saying, this is my calendar. This means this, like this, you would explain the legend and why you keep this to document your symptoms, just to see if medicines are working, when it's getting better, if your whole system is getting worse. And so you're going to be attesting to the factuality of the information and what the symbols mean and abbreviations. And then like someone like me would be doing a letter to the judge, just explaining, what this whole packet, we don't want him to have to do the math, basically. I mean, he's not going to do it. So we explain it and why it's relevant to the case of disability. So consider that. I would say for people also who have to go elevate their legs due to swelling or due to pain multiple times a day, or for like 1 or 2 long stints a day. Some people have to do it midday for 2 hours. Their swelling gets bad or the pain gets bad. It could be napping too, irrelevant from the leg pain, although it's going to be maybe a little bit more difficult. But if you do elevate, if you can, and there's nuances to this, but I've seen judges reject a claimant's description of how often he has to elevate his legs to reduce swelling if they don't see it as a recommended medical home remedy recommended by the doctor, the treating doctor. I find that to be kind of disingenuous, only because you can go on a ton of medical sites with good, fine reputations that will all say that when you suffer edema and swelling, that elevating the legs above the heart can be really helpful to bring down that swelling. So doing it intermittently during the day can help stay on top of that, in addition to other things like compression stockings and taking probably the medication they want you to take. But without the doctor mentioning it, particularly recommending it. So you might want to ask your doctor, hey, I found that, and I don't want to go into how you should actually present it to your doctor. I would think a doctor would be more than happy to say, yeah, of course, that's going to be a good idea. But for some reason, having it in the medical record show up as a recommendation can score points and back up the fact that you do it. If you can't get that from your doctor, you can always report that you are elevating your legs more frequently than you wish. And you can report all this, including migraine issues and stuff like that, through the messaging section of your portal, because they all have portals, right? Almost all of them. And then you know that you have specifically told them, and it's going to show up that you told them the severity of how often you have to do this. And, normally you would be asking about that and suggesting that because you want to go over that at your next doctor appointment to see if there's any remedies or therapies that can help reduce that. Because again, it's taken away from the quality of your life, and it's certainly already taken away from your ability to work full time reliably. So journal, journal, journal. I'll probably do a different video on the helpfulness of communicating yourself with your doctor at times other than when you visit in front of him, which can be kind of infrequent, right? So look out for that. But the symptom journal, definitely keep it. When in doubt, keep it, keep it, keep it. You may not end up using it for the impairments that I just discussed. It would be immensely helpful, but there's other ones that it probably would too. So I would err on the side of caution and just do it, because if you don't, you cannot go back and change time. All right. It's already done in real time, or you just lost that chance. And that's something that doesn't cost you anything to do except seconds or minutes each day. Okay. So hope you start doing it. And if you have any questions, you know where to reach me. Have a great day. Bye.